Thank you so much. I so appreciate it. Really excited about the conversation. This is one of those that is very near and dear to my heart. So excited we're going to be having it here. My hope is to get as much interaction and discussion as is possible throughout the conversation. So that's what we want to be doing. Our objectives. And to me, when we put out learning objectives, we do it because we're supposed to do it, right? The reality is these are on you. I can put things out there and it's up to you what you want to take away from it. So first off, we are going to take a look at some of the points specifically from ICF's Code of Ethics, core competencies, and PCC markers that to me speak to diversity. And we may all have different opinions on that. That's okay. You can agree or disagree, whatever works for each of you. We've got a couple of case studies to talk about and have some fun with that. And then we're going to talk about doing good. Number 28 from the Code of Ethics, which is my absolute favorite. And I break it down into 5 different steps for what any one of us can do to do good. And to me, that speaks to the whole question of diversity and equity. First off, many of you may have seen this. For those of you who are not on camera, not sure if you can see the screen. So I'm just going to highlight a couple of things that are here. ICF has a statement out about diversity. They talk about how our membership is in more than 140 countries and territories, and to globally advance coaching is the mission. The challenges that come with this include systemic problems in the different communities. So as members of the ICF community, we have our core values, and part of this is a shared commitment to diversity, inclusion, belonging, and justice. That is being placed at the forefront of decision-making in the ICF organization. If I go specifically, the question, how does the Code of Ethics provide guidance for diversity? How do the competencies support diversity? And how do the PCC markers inform diversity? I'm going to share a quick list of the specific ones. For those of you who want, grab out your copy of these documents of the Code of Ethics, of the core competencies, of the PCC markers. I know I tend to geek out on this stuff. I will bring each of these up on the screen. And again, my thought is instead of taking a lot of time to read it, I really want to put it up and highlight it because I know some people, again, are not seeing the screen. I'm going to share what I'm putting up on the screen for their benefit. So number 11 from the Code of Ethics tells us to be aware of and actively manage any power or status difference. And that power or status difference can be caused by cultural, relational, psychological, or contextual issues. Even just the fact that, okay, we're hired as the coach. People are used to, when I hire a professional service provider, they're the expert. And there's this inherent perceived power difference right out the door. And the reality is, when you look at our definition for coaching and who we are and what we do, we're there as partners. We're not there as the expert. The client is the expert. And we've got to manage what might be perceived as a power difference. And that can be stronger in certain cultures than it is in others. So whatever the reason behind it, noticing it. Thoughts or comments on this one before I go on? I'm seeing a few nodding heads.
I see one comment in there. Lillian says, if the client is the expert, then that power is not equal.
Oh, so
which is very interesting.
Let's play with that for a second. The client is the expert in their life. I'm not asking them to run mine. I'm the expert in my life. If I'm there as the coach, I'm not there to run the client's life. I'm there to be their partner as they explore how they want to run their life. So when we're coaching, yes, we hold the client as their own best expert. That's our job. That's our responsibility. Our expertise is the coaching process. That's what we bring to the table. Somebody else jump in. What are some other thoughts on this? Interesting discussion right away. I love it.
Yeah, Cathy, this is Kim. I think sometimes there is a power differential perceived when someone's coming from for instance, when you're coming as a corporate hire to coach, that then it's one of their execs, and somehow you know better because you were hired by the company, because you're the one the company is paying to do what it is that they need to do in their lives, which of course we are not the experts in. But it's interesting to reground that multiple times. And anyway, I think this is the contextual situations is really, really, really great.
Yeah. Well, and having the whole conversation in that scenario with that individual in terms of what is coaching, what isn't coaching, how does it work? What's my role? What's your role? What are my responsibilities? What are your responsibilities? And really establishing that agreement on the front end so that there's the clear understanding. We often talk about, I'm there as the process expert, they're there as the subject matter expert. No. Other thoughts? Hopefully we'll get more going when we bring up those case studies. So number 23 in our code of ethics tells us that we hold responsibility for being aware of and setting clear, appropriate, and culturally sensitive boundaries. And that's for our interactions, whether it's physical or otherwise. Of course, in today's world, we're more and more on Zoom and that kind of thing. At the same time, there are coaching sessions where they're face-to-face. And I think that culturally sensitive one can be really interesting too. Let's see. And it says, oh, love that point in the chat box. I think it might be speaking to the last one, that if the client feels there's an unequal status or unequal power balance, it can put them on the defensive and interfere with trust. Totally agree with that. Absolutely makes sense. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. And then here it's the boundaries. What are the boundaries? So if you meet somebody face to face, oh, go ahead, please. Is it, let me see if I can, Shakti?
Shakti, yes, thank you.
Okay,
Yes.
okay, good.
I think this also goes to the last one, and I was trying to figure out how to say this so that it would make sense, but the culturally sensitive aspect of the relations that people have with others. If your client actually is more comfortable being in a certain position, doesn't equating, so we're, doesn't kind of taking them out of, and that might not be what we strive to as coaches and per our, per the ICF, from the ICF's perspective. So how do you then bring that, and I'm struggling here with the words a little bit. How do you do that? How do you handle that so that the client still is in the place where they're comfortable, even though that might not actually fit? Does that make sense?
I feel like I'm hearing a couple of different things. So let me throw that out and see if I'm even on track with what you're saying. Part of me heard this physical position, how they sit and position themselves. Part of me also heard position as in, their level of stature in the professional world or that type of thing, which can also play into it.
Yeah, like it could be male, female. It could be, I don't know, somebody with a different educational background versus the other person, whatever, in the culture of the client then causes them to look at you as the coach differently
Mhm.
in this relationship. Does that make sense? Beyond how we may want to be experts in coaching and you're an expert in yourself.
Mhm. Yeah, no, absolutely. To me, it goes back to that agreement phase before we even start coaching and setting that up and establishing that. I think the big question that comes to mind for me is if there's a client who perceives me differently because I'm female or whatever other reason, how is that going to impact the value or benefit gained from the coaching relationship? So if the client sees me as the expert, as was noted in the chat box, then that'll interfere with trust. I think similarly, if they see me as less than for whatever reason, that'll interfere with trust. How are they going to trust me if I'm less than? And so ensuring that we're on the level playing field, we're balanced in terms of that, I think is a big part in serving the client. I think I'm seeing the wheels spinning.
Yeah, the only thing that came to my mind is that in my experience, I've had a few clients that feel that they have a tendency to look up to the person who they are, who they're maybe hiring as a coach, or, because of culturally, like in my culture, you're always looking up to your teachers. Teachers weren't really looking at their students as equals. They were always looking, I always got the sense that they kind of looked down at me as a student back in the day. It might have changed now, but, so if somebody comes into a meeting from that perspective, like, oh no, you tell me, or you obviously, this is not what I'm trying to follow, this is not something I would be comfortable with. So if a client and I just put that in the chat, if a client can't get comfortable with the fact that they are their own expert, and I may not be the coach for them, right? But because I think we both need to be comfortable with whatever expectations are set there.
Yes. Yeah. And I love that even just having the conversation about it is a part of this. It makes me think about it this way. Have you ever had the conversation about whether or not as a coach you give advice? Obviously, we don't give advice. That's not what we're there to do.
Well, you kind of are giving advice like this worked for me, but again, you recognize that they're their own individual, because like in my space, people are so their own individual because we're each so uniquely different. The only thing we have in common is our high sensitivity. So when I say to them, I had this experience, then they can go, oh, and then it helps reframe for them what their experience is. You're not there, like in that moment, you're an expert, but then they're the expert next. So it's a dialogue, but nobody is and everybody is. It's not one or the other. It's both or not both.
Yeah. So perhaps we're saying the same thing in a different way. When I say level the playing field, the client is their own best expert for themselves. They're the ones who know their relationships, their influencers, their competing priorities, their stakeholders, everything else that's at play for them. It's impossible for me to know everything about what's going on for the client. We can know a lot. We don't know everything. In terms of giving advice, no, that's a very clear piece to us. As a matter of fact, for example, when we assess recordings for people who are pursuing a credential, if the coach is giving advice, then it's an ethical violation. That's not our job. We're there as coach. We're not there to give advice. Do we brainstorm with clients? Do we have multiple ideas that they can draw from? To me, the key to it is multiple ideas, because if I only have one idea, it's the same as giving advice. So I've got to make sure it really is a dialogue and an observing, and starting with them and what do they know? And gosh, if you ask somebody else, what are they going to tell you? If I was in your shoes and I asked you for advice, what advice do you have for me? And it's amazing how often clients really do come up with their own answers. The other piece to it that I think about, and this is an example, how many of you have had a client that really just wanted you to tell them the answer? Have you ever had that? Just tell me what to do, right? So think about it this way. Let's say we're good friends, we're hanging out, and we go out and maybe dinner or whatever. We're having a conversation. And let's say I share with you a problem I'm dealing with, a challenge or whatever, and you give me some advice. And you're my friend and I trust you and I tell you, oh, that's really good advice. That's a great idea. I really like it. And I say, oh, I'm going to do that. That's awesome. How likely am I to follow through on that? Not very likely, not going to happen because it wasn't my idea. I think as coaches, if we give them our idea, we actually get in their way. We're interfering with them. It's defeating the purpose of what we're there for. One of the ways I describe coaching is that it's advanced development for advanced results. If they want to go to school, they can go to school. If they want to go training, they can go to training. If they want a consultant, they can get a consultant. Coaching comes after all of that. And this is where they're at a stage of really exploring and figuring it out for themselves. Thoughts or reactions to that? We've got the comment in the chat box. I love it. I ask my own coaches to tell me what to do all the time, even knowing that it's not their role and they're going to push back. So, yeah. Interesting. Okay. Oh, just being lazy. That's pretty funny, Kevin. Thank you for that. All right. I'm going to keep us going. We got so much more we want to cover. Number 25 in our code of ethics. This is the most clearly addressing the diversity piece, and it's avoiding discrimination by maintaining fairness and equality. It talks about no discrimination on the basis of age, race, gender, expression, ethnicity, sexual orientation, religion, national origin, disability, or military status. Are legalese, if you will, that we draw on so many different professions for. That's the most clearly specific in terms of the diversity. Number 28 is my favorite. I love this one. As a coach, we're to be aware of our impact on our clients and on society. And our philosophy is not just avoiding bad, our philosophy is doing good. So, all right. Other thoughts in terms of the code of ethics that speak to diversity? And I love that comment, Lillian. Disability, the very word is discriminatory. Yes, and of course the words have changed and evolved over time. That's what's out there. So yeah, good point though. Very good point. All right, which competencies address diversity? So to me, when we look at number 1, demonstrates ethical practice, we have our definition. The first point under here talks about personal integrity and honesty in our interactions. The second point speaks to being sensitive to the client's identity, environment, experiences, values, and beliefs. Literally telling us to be sensitive to that. And then number 3 says, use language appropriate and respectful to clients, sponsors, and relevant stakeholders. That is different depending on who they are, depending on who we are. Competency number 2 embodies a coaching mindset. I love number 2 here, and I think it actually speaks to diversity as well. And that may become clear later on when we talk more about the doing good. It tells us to engage in ongoing learning and development as a coach. This is an area for us to continue learning and developing. It isn't something that, okay, now I'm done, I'm good, I've got this. It's an ongoing process. I love this number 3, develops an ongoing reflective practice. I'll give you one I learned in a conference that I went to. I thought it was awesome. And they said, imagine this. when you're bringing in a new client, take a moment before you really start working with them. Just journal about them. What do you know about them? What are your perceptions? What's your awareness of them, of who they are? After you work with that client for 6 months, journal about them. What do you know about them? What are you aware of? What are your perceptions? And then take out the page you did before you started and the page you did after 6 months and compare the two. And what does that tell you about your own perceptions and possible biases? Because we all have them, right? We're all human. We all have those biases. So that reflective practice is a way of starting to notice that and be aware of that. Number 4 under 2, so 2.4, remains aware of and open to the influence of context and culture on self and others. And then 5, using awareness of ourself and our own intuition to benefit our clients. Thoughts that are coming up with this one?
One of the first things I do in an initial client relationship is to ask them, point out, like, what do you want me to know about you and your experience and your culture and your beliefs that will help me understand and, make you feel safe through this process. Like, I just come right out and ask them because it's so, I think, so critical. And also, but I love the journaling exercise of before and after, because I think that'll really change over time. But it's always one of my initial questions that I ask them, and I ask them in person because I've found that I used to have it in an intake form and I got nothing. And when I ask them in person, they're like, blah, 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 and they really give us a lot of information. So I take time to answer that question, to ask that question, and it's very fruitful usually.
Yes, absolutely. That's a great example. And to me, it really speaks to, if we're going to be aware of them and who they are, we've got to take the time to get to know them. And that question is serving you really well for getting to know them. Awesome.
Cathy, I had a comment. So I understand that we're supposed to, well, I don't understand. So I always thought, and I still do, that we should come in like really pure and innocent and not bring anything to the table. Of course, I understand people who are different from me and have either, I have certain privileges, other people have other privileges, and there's different spaces they all exist in. And I like your idea of the journaling before, during, and throughout. But I also wonder, does that color my perception and being in the conversation, as opposed to trying to be really blank to everything going on?
Yeah, I love that question. So to me, the journaling is outside of the coaching session. And the purpose, it speaks to the self-reflective practice that we have. And it's not that I'm going to color my perception with it. It's that I'm going to be aware of how my perceptions are colored, to discover that and identify that. Okay.
That makes sense. All right. I get you.
Yeah, that's really good. It's so funny. We all want to be free of bias, or many of us do. I can't say all, right? In theory, we want to be free of bias. The reality is we're all human. And if we're human, whatever diversity we have, whether you can see it or not, comes with it biases. Sometimes we're aware of them, sometimes we are not. The ones we're aware of are easier to manage. It's the ones that we're not aware of that we want to find and discover and uncover so that we can address them.
Yeah, it makes sense. There's a couple of things in the chat. Christine wants to know, would you please put the question you asked clients in the chat. I don't know what it was, but it was a good one apparently.
Yeah, I think she's speaking to Galia for that.
Oh,
Galia shared that awesome question that she asked people.
and Shakti wants to see if you can talk a bit more about number 4.
Yeah, remains aware of and open to the influence of context and culture on self and others. All right, let me give you a really easy one. How many of you, when you're making a decision, think about the time and the money that are involved? Right? Very, very common influencer. There are so many influencers in the decisions we make. It goes back to the client really has to be their own best expert, because the influencers go obviously far beyond time and money. That's just one that's kind of an obvious one that jumps out. Think about the influence of context and culture. So what are the family dynamics? What is their culture? What did they learn growing up in that? Even just when you think about it, when we do a coaching agreement in the United States, we say a best practice is a written agreement. In some countries, that's insulting. A written agreement is an insult. So we've got to be aware of that and flex to that appropriately. Are we going to know everything? That's the challenge. I know I stick my foot in it more than once, right? We want to, we work at that. That's an ongoing process. The reality is it's there. So the more we can say, okay, as you said, Jimmy, come in with that. I'm the blank slate. I'm totally open wherever this goes. We also want to be paying attention to, hey, what's influencing their thinking?
Hey, can I make like an example here?
Sure.
Okay, so today I got into a fight with the American Autism Association.
Okay.
Because they kept telling me that they were taking care of people like me because my autism is like I'm on the top of the IQ scale and I don't have any deficiencies. And they don't think they need to serve people that like me. But I also have all of these sensitivities of somebody who is on the lower side. And I kept saying to them, oh, you know, are you going to serve people like me? We have a whole tsunami of high functioning autistic women and men that are going to be coming to you and you have nothing. And they assured me, yes, we have it, we have it. And so I wrote them a list of things saying, these are what we need, and not a single one is getting hit. And all I wanted them to do is just say, oh, thank you. Instead, they won't talk to me anymore. and like, there's people coming to you saying to you, you're doing it wrong because they want you to just see them. And if you just say, oh, thank you, I know now. I won't do that again. And if I do, let me know. But it's just about being vulnerable and saying, oops, because we have so much fear of being vulnerable, but that's the whole purpose of coaching is like, you're sitting there being vulnerable with each other. So I just thought it was a good example. I hope it's valuable.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and actually our competencies talk to us about being vulnerable, being transparent and vulnerable with our clients. So, yeah. Good. I like the other piece to it. Whereas in that situation, what was missing for you was the acknowledgement of what you were sharing. In coaching, what's a big part of what we do? We acknowledge our clients. We acknowledge what they're telling us. We acknowledge what they're experiencing and explore it as appropriate. So, yeah. Good. Okay. Competency number 4 cultivates trust and safety. 4.1 talks about understanding the client within their context, which may include their identity, their environment, their experiences, their values, and their beliefs. This goes back to, and Galia, thank you for putting that question in the chat box. It's there. She asked clients, what do you want me to know about your culture, values, and beliefs that will help me understand you and better help me support your growth? So literally opening the door to that awareness. And there are so many different ways you can do that. It's being intentional as a coach. Are you opening the door to really getting to know the client so that you do seek to understand their context? 4.2 tells us to demonstrate respect for their identity, their perceptions, their language, and adapt our coaching to the client. And then 4.6 demonstrates openness and transparency, right to what you were saying, Lillian, as a way to display vulnerability and build trust with the client. It's right in our competencies. And if I continue this, competency 6, listens actively. 6.1 says considers the client's context, identity, environment, experiences, values, and beliefs to enhance understanding of what the client is communicating. Kind of feels like it's all pulling together into that, right? All of these things that we're talking about. Number 7, it just continues. 7.7 is evokes awareness. So 7.1 considers client experience when deciding what might be most useful. Number 7.3, ask questions about the client, such as their way of thinking, values, needs, wants, and beliefs. And 7.8 helps the client identify factors that influence current and future patterns of behavior, thinking, or emotion. Those are the parts to me that stood out in terms of the competencies. When we think about the PCC markers that we go to next, the PCC markers are the specific behaviors that are assessed when you go for a credential to determine your application of the competency. So by extension, really the behavior that shows you're using the competency. To me, the PCC markers that speak to the diversity, 4.3, coach acknowledges and supports the client's expression of feelings, perceptions, concerns, beliefs, or suggestions. And so when we see acknowledge, it's literally acknowledging what they're expressing to them and then supporting their expression. That's inviting them to share more and to open up and talk about that. PCC marker 5.1 speaks to us acting in response to the whole person of the client, the who, literally calling out. This is holistic. It isn't just about the task. It's about the whole person. 5.4 demonstrates curiosity to learn more about the client. 6.1, the questions and observations being customized by what the coach learns about the client and their situation. 6.5, the coach asks about how they perceive themselves or their world. 7.1, asking questions about the client, such as their current way of thinking, feeling, values, needs, wants, beliefs, or behaviors. And to me, that's actually carried out further in 7.2 and 3 and 4. 8.6, the coach partners with the client to consider how to move forward. And here's what's interesting to me, including resources, support, or potential barriers. If you think about some of the diversity people are experiencing, and we talk about equality and systemic equality and all of the inequities that are out of there, that plays into this as well, because that's influencing what the resources are, what the support is, and what the barriers are, much like your example, Lillian. So those are PCC markers that called out to me. The hope at this point is, now that we've highlighted a number of those things, let's get a conversation going. So here's the scenario for you. You have a client that is considered a high potential. They are a person of color. They share with you that their biggest challenge in the workplace is dealing with biases and microaggressions. This happens to be your hot button as coach. So now we're going to bring up a bring a bias into this. How are you going to support them? Oh, thank you for that question, Lillian. I appreciate that. That was okay. So a hot button is a very cultural influence there, huh? It is something that really you're passionate about, you care about it, it's important to you, and when it comes up, you really get pulled into it. So I believe, Jimmy, we've got enough people, Misha, we've got enough people so that we can do breakout rooms. I'm thinking 3 rooms for this. And in your breakout rooms, the conversation for you to have is you're going to be working with a client, a person of color who's a high potential in an organization. They're dealing with biases and microaggressions. That's something that you're really passionate about. As a coach, how will you support them? When your group comes back, we're going to ask you to have one spokesperson that will share 3 tips for what you can do as a coach going into that coaching engagement. Sound like a plan? And I am thinking, I say we've got time to give them about 14 minutes. That sound good to you, Jimmy?
Sure does. 14 minutes. Okay. And
In a
Misha's
breakout
going into a room. She's requested to go into a room. So Cathy, you're going to be asked to go into a room because I don't have any way to make it just Misha. So
It's
you and I will stick
absolutely
back.
fine. Yeah, send me to a room.
All right, I'm going to open them up here. It looks like you're going to get about 4 in each room. Oh.
Okay, we're all back.
Well, hello, everyone. Like literally everyone. You all left me.
You're funny.
I knew Misha was
I
leaving.
was
I didn't know
in
you were
with
leaving too,
awesome.
Cathy. And I was like, well,
Go join a breakout room.
I was going to, and then I was like, I forgot. I'm glad you guys enjoyed. I want to hear.
Discussions. Great discussion. So here's what I'm going to ask. I asked each breakout room to have a spokesperson and to come back with 3 tips for the coach walking into this engagement. So first question, who are our 3 spokespeople?
Go, Sergio.
Okay,
I think
Sergio.
I'll take a hit.
Okay,
shot at
Misha.
it.
Do you pronounce it Sergio or Sergio?
Wow, you can do that again. I hardly ever hear Sergio. That's the Dutch version. But I've been called Sergio and worse. So I love the fact that you said Sergio. If we ever get the opportunity to get a drink of choice, milk, water, juice.
Which leaves me hanging.
So,
Do you prefer Sergio or Sergio?
I will answer to either. So Sergio is fine with me.
Okay.
Shakespeare said, "What's in the name?" I was in a terrific group, and I'm trying to remember. Forgive this aging brain if I didn't get them right. Tina, Kim, Christine, and I think Jalia or Galia. Please forgive me if I've forgotten anyone and if I've mispronounced your names. So in our very rich conversation, the 3 tips that we came up with were approach with curiosity, especially because it is so sensitive to our own core. These can sometimes cause us to, rather than seeking to understand, approach with our own biases. So we have to be very careful when we approach these situations, and then unpack those possibilities. Ask for descriptions. Ask for those experiences. Put the person at ease so that they do feel in an unjudgmental environment to be able to share what those microaggressions is what I'm looking for. Look like, describe them. Are those founded in current situations? Are they stemming back from past experiences? So it really gives us an opportunity to approach them in a 360 approach here. Find out what it is. Also, what we discussed was the importance of that self-management, because if these microaggressions and this behavior is a hot button for us, to practice some transparency and share with them that this is sensitive to us and that we are committed to making sure that this is about them and not about us. And if there are opportunities for us to be checked, that we leave that environment open for them, because it is a two-way street. And I think that's my notes. My awesome team members, if I've forgotten anything, please chime in and I will clean your porch.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay. So I know we've got Misha that's going to speak, and then who's the spokesperson from the third group? Is Shakti, are you volunteering?
Sure, I'm happy to switch with whoever else wants to jump in, but yes, if for lack of anyone else.
You forgot to choose one, but that's fine, Shakti.
Iris, would you like to do the honors?
Not particularly,
Okay.
Shakti, you've been nominated. So
Right.
what are the tips your group came away with?
Sorry. Okay. Sergio said it so beautifully. It was very similar, actually. Although I don't think I could have put it together so nicely, but it was definitely a lot on really understanding the perspective that the client has on the issue and understanding exactly what is happening, right? Really, as so beautifully the question was asked when we left this room, what does hot button mean? It's such a common, or is it hot button? But such a common thing that we use all the time. But what does it mean in this context?
Mm-hmm.
What does it really mean here? And so language is so tricky that I think really asking very basic details, and I think we all kind of started with this, understanding also where does the client, what did they see what is it that they want? How do they see this being for them? What is the ideal outcome? And then I believe another big part was, it was one other thing that came to mind and now it's left me, but Angela, I believe that was one of your points. Can you?
Yes,
chime in here with?
I'll chime in. It was always also remembering our part in it. So one of the parts of the question was, this could be a trigger in you. It's a hot button for you as a coach. So in the beginning, I was saying, first recognize that this is a hot button for you, and how can you neutralize yourself, like emotionally, before becoming available to serve your clients. So that self-awareness first, this is a hot button for me. How is it showing up? How could it prevent me from serving my client the best way possible? So how can I do something like breathing or whatever it is to really neutralize yourself, and then start asking the next questions in order to serve the clients from a more neutral perspective.
Yeah. Awesome. And Misha, speak up for
Yeah.
the group.
Yes, I'm going to have 3 and a bonus. And before I actually speak, I want to just give a shout out to our past president of 2019, Angela De Sosa. Thanks for joining the party tonight. So our group saying some similar things here. One is self-awareness, see how this is, and got to say that emotional intelligence class today really just helped us to give thought to this. But self-awareness, see how it's you're being impacted, what's coming up for you, self-management, and eventually getting to the point in that self-management that this is not about you, this is about the client in front of you. And third, be curious around how what's influencing that client, right? What are perhaps the cultural influences that's contributing to this client showing up the way they are. And then the bonus would be that how they're showing up emotionally is telling on themselves. And Lillian, you probably could add a little bit more to that if I didn't say it as clear enough. And those emotions, being in tune with the emotions that's coming up from the client will tell where they are. And then we could be skillful coaches to really navigate and allow that conversation for them to see themselves on how they're showing up, hopefully. Done.
I want to add one more thing that we talked about in our group, but it didn't get surfaced because I think we all are saying many of the same things of how we start. But I think if we want to get to the next thing after we do all of these things, I think visioning for the client would be very important, be really meaningful, like transport them to a place where they're not experiencing microaggressions and biases. And what would that look like for them? And what is that going to feel like? I think will really then inform how we can get them there. But I think the visioning is the step after all of these wonderful ideas that we discussed already.
And the step, I think Misha was inviting from Lillian, because Lillian was sharing, talk about what their options are in these different scenarios and what the implications are of that. So yeah, fabulous, fabulous. For the next one, tell me how y'all feel about this. I'm thinking about saying, let's do this one in the big groups. So I've got another case study to share with you. You have an individual. The coaching is about their leadership role in the community. You learn that they're focused on their religious community, and you yourself are interested in supporting LGBTQ, and in theory, AI plus gets added onto that as well. How are you going to handle this?
I got to say, I like these questions because these are real, right? These are real topics, real situations. And it could be a first, right? And you're thinking to yourself, this is different. And you might not know how to respond in the moment. So I appreciate you bringing these topics up, or these case studies up, Cathy, because it really lets us think it through. And I got to go with the self-management. That's my first piece of go-to, and that's language. Again, I have to admit that came to us today that I'm grateful for, because it's about the client in front of you. It has nothing to do with your personal agenda or personal liking or what have you. I mean, yes, you have a choice all the time. You have a choice, but it's really not about you. It's about your client in front of you. And then I have to pause. I just paused a moment because then values came up. So what if it breaches your values? And I think that's where I really have to do a serious pause, like right now, and think that through. Because initially my thought was, it has nothing to do with me, it's about the client. But what if it breaches a coach's values?
Yeah, so I hear that, Misha. For me, it brings up an ethical dilemma of whether I'd be the right coach, the right person for that client to begin with. I guess I'd want to know more about, what they were looking for in this leadership role and what their outcomes, their hoped for outcomes were. It would be hard for me to separate my values if their intention was to act in a way that, I would consider harmful or unethical from, from my value system, I might actually withdraw from the coaching engagement.
We recently in the ethics community of practice had just a fascinating discussion going on. Similar case study. And in this case, it was actually a reversal. The coach was religious. The client was LGBTQAI. And it's, okay, do I coach this person or do I not coach this person? One of the questions, if you look at our code of ethics to what you're saying, Iris, is number 17 says, recognize my personal limitations or circumstances that may impair, conflict with, or interfere with my coaching performance. So on the one hand, if, as you're saying, Misha, my values, my beliefs are in conflict, is that going to interfere with me properly serving the client? And then similarly, we go back to avoiding discrimination in a scenario like this. I love it. Somebody said to me, a dilemma is when there isn't necessarily a right or wrong answer.
But this doesn't give us any information. It says you learn their focus within the religious community. I mean, it could be the satanic church. I don't even understand this. Like, why are we jumping to all these conclusions?
We
have no
don't
clue
know,
about
right?
it.
It's intentionally there to invite the group go where they want to go. So religious community commonly carries a connotation with it. And we all have biases around what that may mean in terms of religious community. And so
I saw this, if I can jump in, as there's 15 different scenarios like this, right? It could be abortion rights. It could be a million different. It could be racial situations. It could be male, female, gender related. It could be anything. It could be anything. And what I think at the end of the day, the gist of this case study to me resonated as a clash of values between coach and client. I don't even care what the value is. Right? I could be the racially biased person in the picture as the coach, because I'm sure there are coaches out there who are racially biased in general, as there are human beings who are racially biased. This is a reality of the world. And so there will be coaches out there who are like that. And so I feel that whenever there's a clash of values, I think you as a coach have an obligation to question whether you can support your client. And I don't know, I apologize, I don't know whether it's a specific ethic that we're supposed to be upholding, but you have to. I think you cannot support somebody properly, even if it's not your perspective that counts. But if somebody is squarely against your values and their values, I don't see how you can support somebody in that way and be true to yourself. And come and you cannot show up, in my view, authentically, and you cannot show up fully supporting your client and creating a safe space for them if you have a clash of values that is that you know of. So any value really here is relevant, in my view.
Yeah.
Shaki, I'd like to challenge that a little bit, because my gut says, yeah, you're right, 100%. But I had a really interesting situation where I was coaching a client. It was really a lot about business and development and professional development. And as the trust and the bond grew closer, he then started to reveal more of his personal life. And boy, did that clash with my values as he started talking about his mistresses and about flying here and going there. And I was like, and it was so difficult. But at that point, I had established respect and trust. And so it got really tricky for me. But I continued to support him and and he knows. I mean, I sort of agree. He goes, "Are you uncomfortable with me sharing this?" I said, "I'm not. I'm here to listen to you, because I'm in, but I do want to, I'm glad I'm not married to you. I think I said to him at one point, because that would not work for me, but I'm not judging you. I just want to help you. Right.
Yeah.
But it was so tricky to hear all of this stuff revealed after I already thought he was a great guy. So it's really tricky when
we're
it
well
happens
into the
after.
engagement. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, don't you really have to honor that at any time, though? I mean, you can never get to know somebody in one conversation, and I will never know somebody's deepest values in the first X conversations. So whatever X plus 1 is, when I find out now the big picture of who this person is, again, I gave my perspective. Every coach has to decide whether they can still be authentic and true and continue to create and hold a safe space from that point forward, right?
And I think that's where the two of you are overlapping. And it's the coach checking with themselves. Can I serve this client?
Yeah.
And if there is this conflict in values, it goes back to being transparent and vulnerable. What do I disclose? Where do I give the client the choice? I often talk about, okay, can I serve this person? Yes or no? If I can, is disclosing this potential conflict going to help them decide whether or not they want to continue working with me? Because ultimately it's their choice, or is it a non-issue? If it's potentially perceived as a conflict, then disclosing it to them makes sense. And I give them the choice of whether or not to continue. If I say to myself, no, I really can't serve this person, then I'm asking myself, okay, is telling them the specific conflict going to add to or create a problem? And if it's going to add to or create a problem, it may be I have to say, I've got to remove myself. I have a conflict. And if the client says, what's the conflict? I say it's personal. Now, if telling them the conflict is not going to add to or create a problem, then I can disclose the conflict and I can help them find a different coach. I love the summary that you gave of this is about a conflicting values, because that does come up for us in coaching. And I love the conversation you're all having about checking with yourself. Can I serve this person? Is this the right thing? So, yeah.
I want to also add here, Cathy, and correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of these case studies are typically built from real life scenarios that have come up, correct?
Yes.
Yes, and hence the reason why these sessions are important to just help us as professional coaches to have these conversations and really think these things through. So this is my little pushback of that we shouldn't be thinking about it until it comes up. Is because it's come up already. That's why we're having these, one of the reasons why we're having these conversations. And remember, as ICF coaches, we are governed by these ethical code of conduct.
But the question is wrong if you ask me, because it's not about whether they're the right person. It's whether that person is like I don't actually care what you're doing with your life. You're going to screw me if you're the type of person that's going to screw people. It's about you protecting yourself right out of the gate. So you're like,
So,
I can't
and
do
I'm gonna rein it in, Lillian, because I do have a couple of things to share with you, and I'm gonna run out of time.
Okay.
So let's pull it to this. As a coach, something comes up, there's a conflict of value. You're checking with yourself. Can I serve this person? Yes or no? In your case, Lillian, if you're like, no, they're gonna hurt me, then you're saying, no, I can't serve them because that's gonna get in the way. And then you're removing yourself. If you're saying I can serve them, even though I have this difference in value, then it's okay. Now I have to have the conversation with the client because they also have choice in the matter. Shakti made that comment in the chat box. So really, really good discussion. It'd be so much fun if we had 10 more hours
It never fails about
to continue. One of the things that commonly comes up for people is when we talk about diversity, we say, oh my gosh, it's this whole big bad world out there. I am just me. I'm one little old person in this big world. How can I possibly make a difference? And that's where I want to take a few minutes and go just very quickly on what any one person really can do. I can't change the world. I can influence what I can influence. Have you all heard the story of the little boy walking along the beach with a grandparent? And the little boy picks up a starfish and throws it in the water. And there's hundreds of starfish all over the beach. And the little boy's picking up starfish and throwing them in. And the grandparent says to them, what are you doing? Oh, if I leave them there, they're going to die in the sun. Well, there's so many, you can't possibly save them all. And the little boy picks up the next one, throws it in the water and says, saved that one. We can't do everything for everyone. We can't be all for everyone. What we can do is say, okay, what is within my control? What can I do? Doing good, number 28 from our code of ethics. What does that mean to you? What do you want coaches to do in terms of doing good? And then what are you doing? So those I'm going to leave as reflection questions. And I'm going to move into this. I think there's 5 things we can do. Number 1, learn. Number 2, self-assess and strategize. Number 3, our self-reflective practice. Number 4, communicate openness. And number 5, expand access. So let's continue and go a little bit further with each one. First, learn. Research and read. It is incredible, some of the information that's out there. And many of us just don't know. It's not that we're bad people. We just don't know. So getting out there and researching and reading, learning. Learn about some of the systemic biases that exist. Learn about what people are dealing with. Conferences and workshops are a great place for that. If you're familiar with ACTO, the Association of Coach Training Organizations, they do a fabulous conference every year. They've got one coming up, I want to say next week or the week after, and they'll do a lot on this topic. And conversations like this, having these, in addition to them helping us prepare, it really is part of our own ongoing learning and education. Knowing what our code of ethics is telling us and having an awareness, at least a starting point in terms of processing things. The second thing we can do is self-assess and strategize. So where are we at now? And there are a lot of different online assessments that you can take in terms of bias and discovering your own. I think another thing you can do, if you're a coach and you're in business, go look at your website. What is it expressing? What's your ideal? So here's where I'm at. Here's what my ideal is. And then be intentional about moving toward that. A third thing we can do is our self-reflective practice. Schedule time for yourself. This is part of what we do as coaches. It's in our competence. It's part of us being able to show up and be present for clients. Have options for how to have your self-reflective practice. I mentioned one being the journaling about a client before you get to know them and then after you get to know them, so that you can start seeing your own patterns or trends. Another option, we talked about it earlier, is a cultural bio. A cultural bio is expressing you, who you are, what your background and experiences are that give people a sense of you. Having that about yourself and then inviting that, much the way Galia is doing, so that you're learning about the client. And taking time for that awareness. You all talked about that in that first breakout room, that awareness of self, of others. Communicate openness. The words you use, the images you put out there, on your website, on your social media, and the engagements you take on. Communicate your openness. And then expanding access. Where can we bring coaching that it isn't happening or that people can't access it? Are there opportunities with nonprofits? Can we do sliding scale with our fees? Are there places we can collaborate to make coaching available to people who otherwise don't have access to coaching? I've got a number of resources to share with you, and yes, you'll have access to this PowerPoint. All of these come to you through ICF and the Ethics Community of Practice. So ICF's got a number of things on their website. There's a series you can go through in terms of learning about the ethics, of course, access to the Code of Ethics itself, and the ethics interpretive statements. I'm curious how many people have read those. I've got a couple who have. Awesome, way to go. That is huge. By the way, I have with the new level 1, level 2 ICF is doing, I've got people that are now doing the level 1, level 2, and they're taking the new exam. And here's what they shared with me. Reading those ethics interpretive statements really helped when it came to taking that exam. So I'm gonna give that as a challenge to all of you to read ICF's ethics interpretive statements. In addition to that, there's an FAQ page on ICF's website. There is a CCE course you can take on their website, and you are required to have continuing education in ethics specifically when you renew with ICF. There is a hotline, either email or phone, if you have a question. Hey, this came up, how do I deal with it? And there's a place to file a complaint. The ICF Ethics Review Board. The Ethics Community of Practice, we do quarterly webinars. The one we've got coming up in October, and it's free to all ICF members. We're going to be talking about the ethics of packages and refunds in coaching. We also have an incredible online discussion going on in Basecamp. Love the conversations there. And then there's a monthly meeting. We call it the Ethics Water Cooler. And we get in and just talk different scenarios and situations that come up. So a lot of great resources for you. I'm gonna back up if I can. Jimmy told me I could. Just a quick plug. We do a class called Equity and Diversity in Coaching. And if that's something of interest, of course, come check it out. There'll be one in November. And I am happy to be available and of service as well. So to me, this was a really fun conversation. I love all the different viewpoints and being able to talk about them, get them out there. That's awesome. So thank you, every single one of you, for fully participating in that. I know we're at time. Jimmy, I'm happy to hang around if people have additional questions. And I know you got to do your wrap up as appropriate.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much, Cathy. That was another amazing masterclass by a Master Certified Coach. Thank you so much, everybody. If you haven't already, I see 6 people have. Go ahead and fill out the survey so that we can see what's on your mind and what you're thinking. We always love getting some feedback from you guys, so we deliver the best programming for you. Cathy, once again, thank you so much for taking the extra time with us today and facilitating such a great conversation. Everyone in the room was amazing today, and the breakouts look like they were fantastic. Remember, the next master classes in October are on Thursday the 6th, not Wednesday, Thursday the 6th. Where we'll have Tracy Sinclair and Joanna Davis. And also check out Andre Brown on September 20th. And if you're interested in joining our book club, we still have spaces available. So go ahead and join the book club. Everything's on the calendar, super easy to find. And that's it. We will send out your CCEUs and links to the recordings in about 2 weeks once we get all that stuff processed out. So thank you. Misha, do you have any words?
Just a big thank you to Cathy. I tell you, we get really happy about these case studies, and we blink and time goes. So Cathy, you must come back with us in 2023 and play with us some more. This was really good.